This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Pick up a new skill or just learn more about things like science, math, engineering, computer science, and so much more thanks to Brilliant's accessible and interactive courses. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/skillup or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.
Hades holds a special place in my heart. It's one of the best roguelites of all time. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. A game so good that it made me go back and play every past Supergiant game. All excellent, by the way, especially Transistor. It was also the first video game I got my missus into. She's very big on Greek mythology, and she was hooked within the first hour. In fact, the only piece of physical art that we have up in our apartment is this limited run Hades piece that sits framed in my study. As much as I love that game, I was not expecting a sequel. Hades was their magnum opus. It took everything that Supergiant had learnt from their previous games and packaged it into this phenomenal roguelite that redefined the genre. Like, how do you follow up from that? Well, Supergiant casually dropped Hades 2 into early access last week, and we got our answers. One answer was to make it bigger, but not just a little bigger, I mean a lot bigger. Now, I'll do my best in this video to avoid spoilers. Rest assured, I'm only going to show a few characters and locations here, and they're just a fraction of what you'll come to discover by yourself. You've probably seen the headlines that the early access release of Hades 2 has like double the amount of content as the 1.0 release of Hades 1, and I'm pleased to report that is no exaggeration. In that way, I suspect a lot of people will assume that Hades 2 is just more Hades. And while that's certainly true by most accounts and would have been more than enough to satisfy fans of the original, what I'm personally most impressed by is the expertise by which Supergiant have made Hades 2 feel both familiar and fresh. The new protagonist, Melinoe, I'm just gonna call her Mel for the rest of the review. She plays quite differently to Zagreus, with a focus on crowd control, positioning, and resource management that is both quite thematic to her, but also provides extra dimensions to combat. There's deeper buildcraft through the expanded boon system and improved persistent upgrades that offer more flexibility. The all-new zones aren't just plentiful and visually diverse, but also change up the gameplay structure to make each run feel more varied than ever before. Supergiant took everything that made the original game so special and weren't content with just doing more of it, but have also come up with meaningful additions that make Hades 2 feel truly distinct from the first. The early access of Hades 2 has already received unanimous praise, and it should be no surprise to you that I share that admiration. This isn't just impressive as an early access title, isn't just impressive as a sequel, but I dare say it's already an impressive offering as a full-fledged video game. There's so much here already of such high quality and polish that I think you could confidently pick this up now and treat future updates as extra content releases. To catch lightning in a bottle once again is no small feat, but from what I've seen so far, Supergiant are well on their way to doing just that.
In the city. Have to get through.
I was pretty intrigued to see how Supergiant would set up the story for Hades 2. In the first game, you played as Zagreus, Hades' son, who wants to make his way out of the underworld to find his mother. But Hades isn't too pleased with his son constantly tearing up the place in his wake, so he employs his forces to stop him and send him back to his room. Where Hades 1 is about this linear, low-stakes escape up through the underworld, with the intrigue led mostly by the mystery of Zagreus' mother, Hades 2 is a desperate fight for liberation that takes place on two fronts, the underworld and the surface world. Taking place many years later, Mel is the secret second child of Hades, and the only remaining member of the family after her brother, her parents, and all those serving the underworld are overthrown by Kronos, the god of time. While he sits the throne, he's also sending forces to attack Olympus to keep the gods occupied and to stall any potential counterattack. Meanwhile, a small resistance force forms within the Crossroads, spearheaded by the witch Hecate, who's secretly trained trains Mel in the ways of witchcraft so that she may one day put a stop to Kronos' reign, rescue her family, and return the world to the way it once was. So there's a lot to chew on there, and some may find that setup a little less clever and intimate compared to the original, but I found that shift in tone helps to make Hades 2 feel quite fresh for a game that can be so otherwise similar to its predecessor. The fate of the heaven and hells are on the line. The gods aren't messing around now, and you can see it in their new character designs, less scantily clad, for the most part anyway, now fully armored up and ready for war. You can also see it in the hub area, the comfort and opulence of the House of Hades swapped in place of a scrappy swampside base camp. But make no mistake, Hades 2 will still feel familiar to you if you've played the first, in all the right ways. Obviously, the presentation, stellar. The signature Hades art style has been well retained here. The music, again by Darren Korb, absolutely slaps to no one's surprise. Supergiant really are masters of their craft when it comes to visual and sound design, and Hades 2 is no exception. The writing is also as sharp as ever, and in the perfect amounts such that it doesn't overburden you with exposition. One of Hades' best factors was how it really nailed the balance of gameplay and narrative, and it's the same here. Each interaction is just a quick-witted back and forth, enough to keep the plot moving and keep you hungry for more, before getting you straight back into the action. And yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed the story so far. There's a lot of intrigue unfolding here in how Kronos intends to cement his rule, and the role Mel plays in uniting the Pantheon against him. It's compelling stuff that got me really looking forward to every interaction. Can't wait to see where it all leads. Many of the gods from the first game return here, which is great, but what stood out to me were how many new characters there are. Hades 1 did an awesome job at introducing you to the characters of Greek myth. They covered so many that, to be honest, I thought they hit most of the big ones, so I was content with the knowledge that the sequel might not offer too much new there, particularly in this early access release. Boy, was I wrong. I won't spoil any of the major ones, but I was so not ready for how many more characters they were able to pull from that mythology. Even toward the tail end of my time with this, 25 hours in, I was coming across new characters and doing that DiCaprio pointing meme. Just remarkable how many there are. They've smartly leveraged the inclusion of the surface world to bring more of those mortal heroes and demigods of legend, each with the same excellent voice work and charming character designs that pull from their mythology as the ones you already know.
Come, I know how dispiriting it is to chart one's course only to lose one's way. We rarely get where we must go the fastest way we can.
Like the first game, there's a seemingly endless stream of discoveries. With every run, you'll come upon new characters, new dialogue, new boons, new weapons, new upgrades. That otherwise repetitive roguelite loop completely melts away because with every run, successful or otherwise, you are rewarded with something new. That loop of discovery is, I think, the special sauce that makes Hades the most addictive roguelite on the market, and it's especially true here with the added layer of depth that Hades 2 has implemented across all its systems.
May my intent be true. And flourish here.
So if you haven't played yet and you're watching the gameplay, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, that looks exactly like Hades 1. I don't blame you. I had the same thoughts when I saw the trailers, and to be honest, I was totally okay with that. I think the art style is most of the reason for those comparisons though, because to my delight, there's a fair number of underlying systems here that make this experience unique. As I explained earlier, Mel is a witch, and Supergiant appear to have really leaned into that fantasy across the board. The combat, for instance, she isn't the speedy brawler like Zagreus, but a spellcaster. She starts out with a staff that has a basic attack with decent reach, a ranged projectile attack, and perhaps most importantly, this binding circle ability. So this replaces Zagreus's cast thing in Hades 1, where he shot a little red blood gem thing that would embed into enemies, and you can modify that in a number of ways. That said, you could definitely get away with ignoring it if you really wanted to. Here, the binding circle is critical to the combat model. It's available across all weapons, and its baseline function is that it freezes the movement of enemies within the circle. This is important because alongside Mel's basic attacks, every one of her moves can be charged to perform a special ability to deal greater damage, but they also cause her to become immobile during that casting period. I feel like you can't spam the dash as much much either, as it has a short cooldown, there's no upgrades to give you extra ones. Instead, you can hold down the button to break into a sprint, which can also be modified a number of ways. So given your reduced mobility and the fact that those harder hitting spells leave you exposed, you're actually encouraged to sort of dive in, plant your binding circle to lock down enemies, and then back out a bit to safely land your attacks and commit to those stronger abilities. Those abilities also consume mana, a new resource specific to Mel, which refills when entering the next room or through various boons. This acts as yet another element for you to build around. For example, one of the first boons I picked up allowed me to recharge mana while standing in the binding circle. So this meant I could keep these high damage spells rolling indefinitely, provided I was careful with positioning. Alternatively, if spell casting isn't your thing and you'd rather return to that brawler playstyle, there's a couple weapons that offer that, alongside boons that can sort of sacrifice chunks of your mana pool to boost your damage and survivability. All that said, I did find melee combat a little more difficult. There's a handful of attacks from enemies and bosses that quickly track your position or do huge AoEs or fire loads of projectiles. I still managed to find success with certain melee builds for sure, but in my experience, combat seemed to just flow better when fighting from a slight distance. Overall though, I really enjoyed this new combat loop. All this put together makes Mel's playstyle feel rather distinct from Zagreus no matter which of the 5 new weapons you're using. With these charged variants of every move, you effectively have double the inputs of Zagreus, offering an extra layer of skill expression and build craft on top of the already fine-tuned combat model. And I especially just love how much that focus on crowd control and resource management fulfills that witch spellcasting fantasy. It doesn't end at the combat though. There's a bunch of new persistent upgrade systems that feel similarly deep and thematic. You've got the Arcana cards, which are kind of like the Mirror of the Night from the first game, only there those upgrades were, rather linear. You'd unlock and upgrade talents one at a time, and the only real depth would come when you unlocked an alternate version of each one that you could switch to. Arcana cards work quite differently. Activating one offers their bonus, but also reveals adjacent cards for you to unlock. So there's an element of discovery there, because you just don't know what the other cards are on the board until you start investing. Crucially though, it runs on this point system where each card has a certain point cost to activate. You can increase your point limit with a currency. There are cards that activate for free if certain conditions are met, such as activating a specific row or using cards with specific point values, and each of these cards can be further upgraded as well. After 25 hours, I've barely scratched the surface with this system, but I am already loving the nuance and flexibility that this adds to progression. Then there's also the Cauldron. Like any self-respecting witch, you'll be learning some incantations. This is ostensibly the Contractor from Hades 1, the place you go to for upgrades to expand the home base, as well as extra benefits for your runs. Where you simply paid the Contractor a couple different currencies for those things though, Mel's got to put in the hard yards herself. You'll need to source various ingredients for your incantations, from resource nodes on your runs, to bosses, to tending to your small garden. I think this is a really smart expansion of the previous game's system. It gives you a cool little side objective to think about during your runs. Like at one point I needed a plant that grows from a seed only found inside Chaos Gates. So for a period, I'd take the shovel tool on runs and enter every Chaos Gate I could find to try and dig them up. Let me tell you, it led to a very exciting but very dangerous run. Like the Arcana cards and mana system, it's a simple layer of resource management that gives the game some extra depth. And it isn't arduous either because of how little it asks of you and how elegantly it's folded into the core gameplay loop. These systems offer a great amount of agency in how you tackle the game's challenges, and this is especially true for the final component that separates Hades 2 from the first game, the level design. In Hades 1, pretty much every zone was structurally identical except for the last one. You clear a room, you pick an upgrade, and then you're given a couple options for which upgrade to go for next, repeat. Spoilers, I guess, for Hades 1, but the last zone would then change this up a bit by giving you a bunch of rooms that you could enter in any order you choose before you fought the final boss. So they played around a bit with changing up the structure there, but in Hades 2, they've extended this to every zone in the game. they each have a unique structure in how you progress through the rooms, and this makes runs feel more varied than ever before. For example, the first zone follows the traditional structure of giving you a couple pathway options after each room. The second zone, however, will give you more pathways, but they're often locked, and you'll need to decide whether to take the gamble to reveal them and face more enemies before they unlock, or just take the option already revealed to you. The third zone is different again, where instead of fighting enemies on a room by room basis, you fight them in open spaces where you can freely roam and unlock multiple upgrades in any order, and also find little extra ones for free. It's a subtle change, the general loop is the same in that you kill waves of enemies to grab upgrades, but now each zone has even more identity, and you've got a bit more agency in how you want to engage with that risk versus reward factor. Speaking of zones, those ones I've listed are part of the Underworld, and as I mentioned earlier, in Hades 2, there are not one, but two entire overworlds for you to conquer in just the early access. That is essentially double what Hades 1 offered at its full release, and believe it or not, Hades 2 plans to release with a third overworld that'll contain more new biomes with unique structural conceits. Just wild to think about how much content this game is going to have at the full launch. With Hades 2, Supergiant have not rested on their laurels. In my 25 plus hours with the early access release, they've demonstrated such ambition to deliver a sequel that isn't just more Hades, but Hades evolved. I loved Mel's unique combat style that makes the core gameplay feel fresh, the new and improved systems that make progression deeper than ever, and I was in awe of the sheer scope of both what exists now and what's to come, especially given the first game already felt like it had so much to offer with its near limitless character interactions and unrivaled build synergy. And there's stuff I still haven't even fully explored, like an extra mode that has you complete challenge runs with preset loadouts, a proper pet system where you can charm familiars that follow you around and aid you in runs, all the alternate versions of each weapon that offer extra twists on their combat capabilities. There's a hot tub for when you want to get steamy with your favorite characters. Need I say more? For an early access title, not only is there a staggering amount to see, but I also ran into zero bugs, zero crashes, zero performance issues, nothing. The only thing that would remind me of that early access status was some unfinished art and a thanks for playing the early access splash screen after beating one of the current final bosses. Obviously, your mileage may vary, but I'd say you can confidently jump in right now and expect a watertight experience. If you decide to wait until the 1.0 launch though, more power to you. I admire your self-control. I think I'll be parking Hades 2 for now though. I've seen more than enough to convince me that I'll be there day one for the launch of the full release. This is already one hell of a title that I'm sure will only get better with time.
Alright, time to talk about this video's sponsor, Brilliant. So Brilliant is actually a really interesting platform that I've come to really appreciate as I've been using it over the last few months. Easiest way to describe it is, it's a tool to help you learn new things, gain new skills, or just sharpen your mind. So already you're like, hang on man, that sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not, because Brilliant has been designed from the ground up to make this learning really easy and accessible. They provide interactive ways to learn about new things like science, mathematics, engineering, computer science, and more. They have courses big and small, simple and in-depth, all of them illuminating something that seemed at first impenetrable, but really you just needed someone to explain it to you properly, or you needed to learn by doing, which is another thing that Brilliant excels at, since its courses almost always contain some interactive element that lets you apply and test your learning on the spot. What makes it really great is that they have a mobile app, and all of their courses have been formatted to be delivered through mobile. The courses are always really well structured and broken down into manageable chunks, and they actually gamify your learning, giving you experience points and achievements for completing courses, and gradually upping the complexity as you get more proficient in a topic. So now, at least once a day, I boot up Brilliant, chip away at a course, learn something new, and I know that I've fed my brain something more useful. It's like doing a mini gym workout, but for your brain. This stuff isn't just interesting, mind you, it can also be really useful. If you work in data programming, then the stuff you learn here can help you be better at your job, and just having a sharper, more curious mind is going to hold you in good stead no matter what you're doing. I actually just finished a course on large language models, or LLMs. These are things that power most of the AI tools that have popped up, and regardless of what you think about AI, it's really useful to at least understand how that technology works, because it's probably going to have a pretty big impact on our lives in the future. If you're interested, you can try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/skillup, or click the link in the description below. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription if you click that link. That's brilliant.org/skillup. Thanks Brilliant for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.